Rutgers football is back at it on Saturday, November 9th, noon, SHI Stadium on NBC, playing Minnesota, red-hot Minnesota, off a 4-game winning streak. Rutgers coming off its bye and currently on a 4-game losing streak. Apologies to start. David Anderson will not be here this week. Our schedules did not align, so it won't be the typical preview, simply because his knowledge of football is as deep as anyone I know, and I value his expertise so much. So I'm sorry if you're disappointed. I'll do my best. But in essence, this matchup, I think it's pretty straightforward. We don't know what to expect from Rutgers in this game. We don't know health-wise. Schiano talking this week in his press conference that the bye week certainly helped dealing with injuries, but there's also certain injuries that players aren't just going to be right with the extra week. It's not going to be until after the season. So that isn't so promising in terms of this team being dramatically more healthy than they've been during the month of October, where the losing streak began. I think a big question here is Kyle Monangai. His availability has not been confirmed. Obviously, the availability report is released 2 hours before kickoff, but he's playing through an injury. Going into that USC game, has been playing through it, left that game after a helmet-to-helmet hit. So we just don't know. And obviously, if he doesn't play, that's going to hurt Rutgers' chances, not only in this game, but any game he doesn't play the rest of the way, because he is the heart and soul of this team, the engine that makes the offense go. So that's a huge question mark in this game. And if he can go, how productive can he be? He has been an absolute warrior for this program, and he's a joy to watch. And obviously, we hope he can play. Antoine Raymond, Jashawn Benjamin behind him. So that's a big thing to wonder. And then the defense. A lot of starters have been dealing with things, but the bottom line is the defense hasn't been tackling well. They haven't been playing physical. I think the most disheartening thing through this 4-game losing streak is Rutgers has lost its way with its identity. And you could say they're not playing with an identity, or you could argue the identity is a team that isn't being physical and is reactive and not executing at a high level. So will things change against Minnesota? Minnesota coming off a road win at Illinois, 25-17, impressive. Now 6-3, 4-2 in the league. And, I think there's a ton of storylines in this game, obviously, with the relationships with, Minnesota and Rutgers. PJ Fleck, once working for Greg Schiano, Kirk Shiraka coming from Minnesota, as well as Joe Harris-Simiak, Corey Heatherman now leaving Rutgers, and now the DC at Minnesota. You obviously have Ethan Kaliakmanis, was the quarterback at Minnesota, Flip Dixon. There's a lot of storylines here. So emotions will certainly be in play in this game. I don't know how much. The bottom line is Minnesota will know Rutgers inside and out from a scheme strategy standpoint. Rutgers has a really good idea about Minnesota as well. It's going to come down to execution. Obviously, Kaliakmanis is a quarterback. You have to keep your emotions in check. He's going to want to play his best game. He wants this. His teammates are going to want this for many reasons. But I think my concern, just in terms of Minnesota, is Max Brosmer has been very accurate. He's 68% completion percentage. And he's really good at the underneath passes, those 5 to 10 yard passes. And Rutgers has really struggled there. And they've played zone coverage. They've given space to opposing offenses to make completions. Now, Minnesota doesn't have the elite speed that UCLA and USC has. And I think that's one reason for hope, is that Minnesota, other than the Maryland game, they're not an explosive offensive team. But that's not to say that we have a lot of confidence in the Rutgers defense right now. So obviously getting pressure from that defensive front. Can Aaron Lewis be himself in this game? Wesley Bailey, a lot of questions there. And I'm certainly concerned that Brosmer is going to pick this defense apart, as we've seen the last couple of games against USC and UCLA. So that would obviously be a problem. Against Illinois, he had 3 receivers, Daniel Jackson, he's really good, Elijah Spencer, and then Darius Taylor, the running back. They combined for 20 catches for 200 yards. Taylor's been a dynamic runner for them. He had, 130 yards on 22 carries against a good Illinois defense. So Minnesota, their identity is what Rutgers wanted to be this year, and that's a very physical team, controls time of possession, controls the ball with a solid running game, an accurate passing game, and a defense that creates takeaways. They're plus 12 nationally. They're plus 12 for the season, which is top 10 nationally. But in this 4-game winning streak, they're plus 9. Rutgers has not been able to force turnovers. I just don't foresee them winning this game unless Rutgers is going to have to generate big plays and momentum plays, right? The defense has got to get some turnovers in this game and give the Rutgers offense a short field or pick 6 or block kick that leads to a score. Rutgers has to generate some big plays in multiple ways. It's not just about Callie McManus, going off and throwing for 350 yards and completing 250-yard deep balls that, going to result in quick scores. Like, yes, that would be fantastic. Demir Miller had a huge game against USC. Can they build on that? Is Ian Strong healthier now? Can he be an impact in this game? Because when he's healthy, he's been a big factor for this pass offense. Have they found a way to incorporate Christian Drimmel more effectively? All question marks. As the offensive line had more time to gel. A lot of questions in this game. I think momentum is everything. Rutgers has just fallen behind in all 4 of these losses. It's not that falling behind would be insurmountable, but I think just for the mental health of this team, the confidence of this team, they need to start well in this game. And, I'm not confident the crowd's going to be that great, to be honest with you. They're going to have to generate their own momentum. I think this is certainly, and we've said this before, but this really is a gut check game for this team. This is an internal pride game, right? And that doesn't mean if they lose, they don't have pride. But if they come out and get their doors blown off, fall behind, 21-0 in the second quarter, it's going to be very disheartening and upsetting because all of these players work super hard. Obviously, everyone wants to win. They've gone through a lot of adversity this year, but this is a game where they will tell us, I think, how much they have left in the tank. And if they can battle Minnesota, listen, if they could be more physical on the defensive side, Ken Shiraka, I'm not saying he's going to have all these wrinkles, right, that Minnesota doesn't know about, but can he keep them a little bit off balance? Can Callie McManus be super efficient in this game? Can they control the clock with the run game? How effective can Monungai be? If he is Kyle Monungai that we know, then yeah, they have a real shot here. But Rutgers has to play smart. They lead the country in fewest penalty yards per game, so that's a positive. But it's, obviously taking care of the football, and it's more than that. The defense has to get the ball. They need to force some turnovers here. And the Minnesota defense has been fortuitous, so Rutgers has to be careful. And I think it's, obviously you can't play to avoid mistakes. You got to play to win and make big plays. And when Rutgers has been at its best last season, they were making big plays on special teams, on defense, and then they were grinding teams to a halt on offense. So can they find that formula again? Can they restore that identity against as close to a clone of a program identity-wise as there is? Probably Illinois is the other one. So Illinois is going to have all the confidence in the world. They do have a bye next week. This is only their 3rd week in a row, though. They had a bye in October. So the whole idea that, they're 8 weeks in or whatever, they're fairly rested. They're fairly healthy. Obviously, that's been an issue for Rutgers, but that's no excuse in this game. Rutgers had 2 weeks to prepare for. We know Shiano generally, Rutgers plays really well when they have 2 weeks to prepare. But defensively, are we going to see a different strategy? Are they going to wait back and let Brosmer kind of pick them apart? Are they going to tackle better? Are they going to be able to throw in some elements that maybe Brosmer's not expecting or seeing? So you're going to have a little bit of a chess match with Heatherman and Harasimiak, the two defensive coordinators, which have known each other, worked for each other for years. Obviously, Shiraka against Heatherman, know each other well. Fleck knows Shiraka well. They know the tendencies for Callie McManus, who has been better this year for Rutgers than he was for Minnesota last year, but, completion percentage is pretty much identical. So there's not a lot of secrets in this game. And I am a firm believer in creating your own luck at times. And how much energy Rutgers starts in this game is going to be critical, I think, because you have to get off to a good start. Doesn't mean they have to jump out to a big lead or anything, but you can't shoot yourself in the foot early. And I think we'll know pretty early on if Rutgers is going to hang in this game or not. Because if they can hang in the fourth quarter, it's anyone's game. But if they miss tackles early, if they can't generate sustained drives on offense, it's one of those where they could fall behind pretty quick. We saw them battle back against UCLA. We saw them battle back to a degree against USC. But Rutgers is not at its best when it's playing from behind. They're much better playing with a lead, obviously, but that really is kind of the strategy of how Rutgers approaches everything is playing with a lead. And when they don't play with a lead, it really, it's almost like they don't have answers for how they want to play. So it's going to be interesting. I'm trying to be optimistic here, not trying to sound negative or anything, but listen, this team has really struggled and Minnesota is really hot. Now, do things balance out a little bit there? Is Rutgers a 4-8 team? Is it in Minnesota an 8-4 team? Or are they kind of closer together? Minnesota's going to be a 7-5 type team and Rutgers maybe a 6-6 type team. I mean, if that's the case, Rutgers needs to win this game. I just think for the rest of the season, you need to generate some momentum here. And if you can get a win against Minnesota, you're only one win away from bowl eligibility with 3 to play. You lose this game, and you really worry that things really start to unravel. So it's a huge game on the rest of this season, of course. And I really just want to see what this program is made of in this type of situation. You talk about fighting through adversity, and this is where they're at. It makes me think of the Al Pacino speech in Any Given Sunday. We're in hell, gentlemen, and we either fight back together or we die as individuals. I'm not saying that to imply there's a culture problem or anything like that. I don't think there's those types of issues. But if Rutgers is going to pull themselves out of this losing streak, they have to claw their way back in this game. And perhaps that's appropriate, going against Minnesota, going against familiar personnel, coaching, and coming off the bye, I think, is really huge. Just from a mental standpoint, it's kind of overblown with the physical standpoint. Again, Shiano talking about not really, it helps, but it doesn't cure ills, right? But I think mentally more than anything, this team's had a chance to reset. So I'm excited about that possibility because I think that could really help them. Just in terms of, because what you don't want to see is they fall behind by a score and you see heads down. I go back to that Virginia Tech game and the Virginia Tech podcast, Sons of Saturday, they were talking about just how up the Rutgers bench was, the energy they had, the joy they were playing with. You haven't seen that as much with Rutgers lately. So can they bring that to start, and can they maintain that if things start to go a little bad? Because you don't want things to snowball. For Kalik Manis' sake, I really want to see him have a good game. It would just be really fun to see him be able to take down Minnesota. I know a lot of Rutgers fans don't love PJ Fleck. I don't mind him per se, but he's a little blustery. But I think Minnesota's having the season that Rutgers hoped they would have, and Rutgers is having the season that I think some thought Minnesota would be having. But it can change like that, and this is a big opportunity for Rutgers in front of the home faithful. I hope there's a good crowd. Noon start, but just in terms of offense, playmakers have to make plays, right? Demir Miller has to make plays. If Ian Strong is a go, he's got to make plays. Kyle Monungai, if he's a go, he's got to have a good game. Kalik Manis has to be efficient. Can't turn the ball over. Offensive line needs to take a step forward. I mean, the Minnesota defense is very physical. So is the offensive line ready to attack that? Defensively, it'll be very interesting to see just in terms of what that starting 11 looks like for Rutgers. There's been a lot of injuries there, but you've had a lot of time now to scheme for it, to plan for it, right? And I think what adjustments will we see from the defense? If it's the same old kind of plan with the same personnel, I don't know. Can we expect different results? But I think getting pressure to Bosmer obviously is huge in this game because he does have the accuracy and the ability to get short passes out there. Obviously, Taylor, the running back, had 9 catches as a safety net against Illinois. And yards after the catch have been a nightmare for Rutgers against USC and UCLA. So can they put a stop to that against Minnesota? Can they get back to swarm tackling? Can they, they talk about the ball as the program, but can the defense get the ball? Can they create turnovers that are going to change momentum in this game? And I think special teams, too, leaves a lot to be desired. Rutgers has not been the same this year on special teams. So, obviously, blocking a kick can change things. Can Jay Patel, capitalize off a strong performance against USC? Minnesota kicker was 4 of 4 from field goals last week. Just looking it up if I can see in terms of, Dragan Kesic. He had a 45-yarder, 46-yarder, 38-yarder, and 20-yarder. So he was really consistent for them in that game. And I think that's one thing Rutgers has struggled with. Not particularly, not just Patel, but just decision-making with the offense and being able to stack points. Because if you can kick that many field goals in a game, things start to add up. Overall for the season, he's 13 of 19. So, not the most accurate, but he's made his last 6 kicks against Maryland and Illinois. So maybe he's due for a little bit of a bad game. I'm not sure what the wind's going to be like on Saturday. But this is obviously a huge statement opportunity for Rutgers. It changes the whole narrative. If they can win this game against a red-hot Minnesota team, it changes a lot and gives hope that this team will become bowl eligible and they could salvage the season and get 6 or 7 wins. If they lose, you really worry about everything unraveling, and then it just leads to bigger questions. So I hope we have good news to discuss. My rapid reaction won't be exactly right after the game. I'm home with my kids, and I'll get something out Saturday night. But I think it's pretty basic. You got to be plus on the takeaways. You have to limit yards after the catch. Got to generate some pressure. Can the defense be disruptive? Can the offense execute in the red zone? Something they've been lacking. On third down, something they've been lacking. Can they control the clock? Can Rutgers be plus on special teams? And overall, can they generate their own momentum? Right? Because when they go out there to start that game, the way they started so flat against Wisconsin and UCLA, they just dug themselves in a hole that they couldn't get out of. And although it was admirable fight back in the UCLA game, it was not such in the Wisconsin game. And Minnesota plays a tough style. So it's going to take a lot of heart and guts, but I'm optimistic that this team can battle. And again, I think just from a rest standpoint with that bye week, I think mentally it's going to help more than anything. But that would be also kind of a disheartening thing if they're not mentally stronger in this game. Then you have real concerns about the rest of the year. So it's a real prove-it game, statement opportunity for Rutgers football, and we'll see what happens. But not an easy challenge. You know, the way November looked before the season and the way November looks now, it's a much more challenging slate. But you only have 2 home games left, this one and Illinois. So you lost your last 2 home games. Can you respond and win on Saturday against the Gophers? It would go a long way towards restoring faith among the fan base. Can't give up on this team, but let's see what they have left in the tank against a Minnesota team that has run it out the last 4 weeks after a so-so start. So stay tuned here for post-game coverage. Thanks so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful Podcast.